The Sound Mind Gallery. For the Spirit God gave us does not make us timid, but gives us power, love and self-discipline. 2 Timothy 1 verse 7. This verse encourages believers that fear does not come from God, but rather the Holy Spirit empowers them with strength, sacrificial love, and a sound mind to overcome fear. Preface. The book you are holding is more than a story about an artist, a gallery, and a collection of paintings. It is a story about the universal tug-of-war between the shadows we inherit and the light we were designed to carry. We have all been clairvoyants at some point in our lives. We have all stood in a cluttered attic of our own making, looking at a dream, a talent, or a calling, and choosing to cover it with a heavy gray blanket of not yet or not me. We convince ourselves that our silence is humility when in reality, it is often just a very well-disguised fear. In my study of 2 Timothy 1 verse 7, I was struck by the definitive nature of the language. It doesn't say God suggests we don't fear, it says He has not given us that spirit. If fear is not a gift from our Creator, then every moment we spend operating under its influence, we are using a tool that doesn't belong to us. I wrote the Sound Mind Gallery to explore what happens when we finally return that gift of fear to the center and pick up the tools God actually provided: power, love, and a sound mind. As you journey through these chapters, I hope you find the courage to identify your own Dr. Thorne, the voices from your past that told you to play small. More importantly, I hope you discover that having a sound mind isn't the absence of nerves, it's the presence of a divine perspective that allows you to create, build, and love even when your hands are shaking. The world is a darker place when we hide our light. It's time to take the shroud off the easel. Introduction: The Architecture of Fear. We are all born into a world that whispers. Sometimes those whispers are encouraging, but more often, they are cautionary tales designed to keep us small. We call it being realistic or playing it safe, but the Bible calls it by its real name: a spirit of fear. Fear is not merely an emotion, it is a lens. When we look through the lens of fear, every opportunity looks like a trap, and every gift looks like a liability. We hide our paintings in the attics of our hearts, convinced that the world is too harsh for our light. But 2 Timothy 1 verse 7 offers a different lens. It promises that the Creator did not design us to cower. Instead, He equipped us with 3 specific tools: power to act, love to connect, and a sound mind to decide. This story, the Sound Mind Gallery, is for anyone who has ever felt their pulse race at the thought of being seen. It is for the dreamer who is tired of being sensible and the soul that is ready to evict the squatter of fear. As you read Clara's story, I invite you to look at the shrouded canvases in your own life. It is time to pull back the blanket. Author's note on the sound mind. When we think of spiritual gifts, we often think of the miraculous or the loud. We forget that one of the greatest gifts God gives us is sophronismos, the Greek word for a sound mind. A sound mind isn't just sanity. It is a mind that is disciplined, self-controlled, and prioritized. It is the ability to look at a chaotic situation and see the orderly hand of God. In this ebook, you will see Clara move from a chaotic mind, driven by what if, to a sound mind, driven by He is. I hope this story inspires you to realize that your mind is not a playground for anxiety but a workshop for the kingdom of God. Chapter 1: The Anatomy of a Shroud. The attic of 412 Willow Street was a place where time went to hold its breath. It was a cavern of slanted ceilings and exposed cedar beams, smelling perpetually of linseed oil, old wood, and the sharp, medicinal tang of turpentine. Clara Vance stood in the center of the sanctuary, her fingers stained with a smudge of Prussian blue that refused to wash away. Before her sat an easel, but it didn't look like a tool of creation. Draped in a heavy, charcoal gray furniture blanket, it looked like a monument to a tragedy. For 7 years, Clara had been a ghost in her own life. By day, she was the head archivist at the city library, a woman of cardigans and quiet whispers, a master of filing away the vibrant stories of others while her own remained locked in an attic. By night, she painted. She painted with a ferocity that frightened her, creating sunrises that looked like prayers and storms that looked like deliverance. But the moment the sun began to peek through the attic window, the spirit of fear would arrive. It wasn't a loud monster, it was a cold, logical thief. It sat on her shoulder and whispered with the voice of her old university professor, Dr. Aris Thorne. Its derivative, Clara, the memory whispered. It's sentimental. The world doesn't want hope, it wants edge. You're just a girl playing with colors. Clara pulled her cardigan tighter. She looked at her Bible, resting on a stool beside a jar of fan brushes. It was open to a verse she had underlined so many times the ink had bled through the page, 2 Timothy 1 verse 7. Chapter 2: The Professor's Shadow. To understand Clara's fear, one had to understand the critique of 98. In her final year of art school, Clara had presented her thesis, a massive triptych titled The Grace of the Ordinary. It featured a janitor resting his hands, a mother nursing a child, and an old man looking at a sapling. It was a work of pure love. Dr. Thorne, a man whose soul seemed etched in vinegar, had stood before it for 3 seconds before turning to the class. This, he had said, gesturing dismissively, is why art is dying. It's safe. It's nice. It lacks the grit of reality. Miss Vance, if you want to be an artist, you must learn to hate the world a little more. Otherwise, stay in the suburbs and paint greeting cards. The class had laughed. Not because they agreed, but because they were afraid of Thorne. But for Clara, the laughter became a cage. She didn't realize then that Thorne wasn't critiquing her art, he was projecting his own bitterness. She took his words as gospel. She began to believe that her desire to paint beauty was a sign of intellectual weakness. She began to believe that her fear was actually discretion. Chapter 3: The Library and the Little Girl. The shift began on a Tuesday at the library. The rain was drumming a rhythmic beat against the tall glass windows of the reading room. Clara was filing returns when she saw Maya. Maya was 12, a regular who usually checked out books on astrophysics. But today, she looked small. Her eyes were puffy, her shoulders hunched. Maya? Is everything okay? Clara asked, stepping around the mahogany desk. Maya looked up, her voice trembling. My art teacher said I shouldn't draw the stars with faces on them anymore. She said science isn't supposed to look happy. She said the universe is mostly cold and empty, so my drawings should be, too. Clara felt a sudden, sharp pang in her chest. It wasn't pity, it was righteous anger. She saw herself in Maya. She saw the spirit of fear trying to set up shop in a child's heart, trying to extinguish a light before it could become a fire. "Maya, look at me," Clara said, her voice dropping to a low, steady hum. "The universe is vast, yes. But it isn't empty. It's held together by a power that decided every star should have a name. If you see faces in the stars, it's because you're looking with your heart, not just your eyes. Don't let anyone tell you that the dark is more real than the light." As Maya left, clutching her sketchbook, Clara stood frozen. She realized she had just preached a sermon she wasn't following. She was protecting Maya's light while burying her own in an attic. Chapter 4: The Theology of Power. That night, Clara didn't paint. She studied. She took 2 Timothy 1 verse 7 and broke it down like a chemical formula. God has not given us a spirit of fear. If the fear didn't come from God, it was an intruder. It was a squatter. She didn't have to manage it, she had to evict it. But of power. Not her own strength, which was failing, but the dunamis, the explosive, inherent power of the Creator. And of love. The antidote to the critique. If she painted for the love of the subject and the love of the viewer, the ego that feared being laughed at would have to die. And of a sound mind. This was the anchor. The Greek word sophronismos, self-control, discipline, a mind that is calm and well-balanced. Fear is a chaotic storm, a sound mind is the lighthouse. Clara realized her fear was based on what-if chaos, but her faith was based on soundness. She walked over to the easel. With a hand that still shook, but with a mind that was made up, she yanked the gray blanket away. The dust motes danced in the moonlight as her masterpiece was revealed. Chapter 5: The Renovation of the Soul. Clara didn't wait for the fear to leave before she acted. That was the secret of the sound mind. You don't wait to feel brave, you act with wisdom. She found a storefront for lease on the edge of the downtown district. It was an old clock repair shop, covered in grime and neglected for a decade. The rent was exactly what she had in her modest savings account. The next month was a blur of manual labor. Her sound mind told her to make a list. Sand the floors. Paint the walls gallery white. Install track lighting. Curate the collection. Every time her heart raced and told her she was a fool, she recited the verse. She treated the physical renovation of the shop as a spiritual renovation of her own thoughts. As she scrubbed the windows, she imagined she was scrubbing away the cynical words of Dr. Thorne. As she painted the walls, she was reclaiming her right to exist in the world as an artist. Chapter 6: The Unveiling. The opening night was a crisp October Friday. Clara had titled the show The Sound Mind Collection. She wore a simple black dress and a small cross necklace. The gallery smelled of fresh paint and eucalyptus. 24 paintings hung on the walls. Each one was a testament to power, love, and a sound mind. For the first hour, the gallery was a tomb. Clara sat by the wine and cheese, her stomach in knots. The spirit of fear made one last stand. See? You've spent your life savings on a party for yourself. You're pathetic. Then, the bell chimed. A man entered. He was dressed in a tattered coat, looking like someone who spent more time on the street than in a gallery. He walked straight to a painting in the corner, a small piece Clara had hesitated to include. It was a painting of a single candle burning in a drafty room, titled The Defiance of Light. The man stared at it for a long time. Clara approached him, her heart thumping. "Hello," she whispered. The man didn't look at her. My daughter, she used to say the light was winning," he choked out. "I haven't believed her in years. But looking at this, I can feel the heat of that candle. It's like it's real." He looked at Clara, and his eyes were wet. "Thank you for not being afraid to paint something hopeful. Everything else in this city is so loud and angry." Chapter 7: The Ripple in the Water. By 9 p.m., the gallery was crowded. Maya was there, showing her mother the faces and the stars painting Clara had done especially for her. A local journalist from the Daily Gazette was taking notes, mesmerized by the unapologetic beauty of the work. Clara realized that her sound mind had guided her to make decisions that her fearful spirit never could have. She had priced the art fairly, she had marketed to the community, and she had created a space that felt like a sanctuary rather than a cold museum. She wasn't just an artist anymore, she was a bridge builder. She was using the power God gave her to give others power over their own darkness. Chapter 8: The Legacy of the Light. 5 years later, the Sound Mind Gallery was no longer a secret. It had become a landmark, a place where people came when they felt the world was too much to bear. Clara Vance still painted every night. She still felt that familiar tug of nerves when she started a new canvas. But now, she knew the difference between its spirit of fear and the excitement of creation. She eventually received a letter from Dr. Thorne. He had seen a feature about her gallery in an art journal. The letter was short: "I was wrong about the light, Clara. It takes more courage to paint a sunrise than it does to paint a grave. Keep going." Clara tucked the letter into her Bible, right next to 2 Timothy 1 verse 7. She picked up her brush, dipped it into a vibrant, defiant gold, and began to paint. Not because she was fearless, but because she was focused. She was no longer a ghost in an attic. She was a daughter of power, a vessel of love, and a steward of a sound mind. Epilogue: The Defiant Sunrise. The seasons in the city had turned 5 times since the night the bell first chimed in the old clock shop. The grime was long gone, replaced by the warm, inviting glow of track lighting and the soft hum of life. The Sound Mind Gallery was no longer just a storefront. It had become a landmark of hope, a quiet rebellion against a world that often felt too loud and too dark. On a quiet Tuesday morning, Clara Vance sat on her familiar wooden stool, but she was no longer tucked away in a shadowed attic. Her studio was now a glass-walled corner of the gallery, where the community could see the process of creation. She had realized that the power God gave her wasn't just for the finished product but for the messy, vulnerable middle. On the wall beside her hung a small, framed piece of stationery. It wasn't a painting. It was the letter from Dr. Thorne. It takes more courage to paint a sunrise than it does to paint a grave. Keep going. Clara looked at the letter and smiled. The spirit of fear still visited her from time to time, usually on the mornings when a blank canvas looked particularly vast, but it was no longer her master. It was merely a noise in the background, like the distant sirens of the city. She had learned that a sound mind isn't a mind that never feels fear, it is a mind that knows exactly what to do with it. A young man walked into the gallery, his shoulders heavy with the weight of the world. He stopped in front of a painting of a winter forest, where a tiny green sprout was pushing through the snow. "How do you do it?" he asked, not looking away from the canvas. "How do you make it look like the light is actually winning?" Clara set down her palette knife and walked over to him. She didn't give him a lecture on color theory or lighting. Instead, she spoke from the deep well of a heart that had been set free. "I don't make the light win," Clara said softly. "I just stop pretending that the shadows have the final word. God gave us the power to see what is true, the love to share it, and the mind to stay focused on it. Once you see that, the painting almost finishes itself." As the young man walked away, his stride a little lighter, Clara returned to her easel. She dipped her brush into a vibrant, defiant gold. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look for the shroud to hide her work. She was a daughter of the light, and she had a world to wake up.